Welcome back to The Critical Thought. Today, we're excited to introduce a guest who's not just another ex-Jehovah's Witness sharing her story, but she's an advocate, making real strides in challenging the harmful practices of high control groups. Our guest is deeply involved in efforts to end mandated shunning, working with initiatives that aim to protect the most vulnerable, especially those who have been isolated or hurt by these practices. Her work has taken her to the International Cultic Studies Association Conference, where she's been a part of crucial conversations about the legal and academic battles being fought on this front. But her advocacy isn't just theoretical, it's personal. She's experienced firsthand the painful realities that come with leaving a high control group, from the shunning of family members to the abduction of a loved one. These experiences have fueled her commitment to helping others and driving change. In today's interview, we'll delve into the impactful work she's doing, the challenges she's faced, and why this cause matters so much, not just to her, but to all of us.
You're listening to The Critical Thought, where we challenge our listeners to use critical thinking when examining the teachings of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Hi, this is Lady C.
Hi, this is JT, and welcome to another episode of The Critical Thought. In today's episode, our guest, Monica, will not only share her life experience of being involved with the Jehovah's Witnesses, but she will also share her experience of what she is doing since she has left as an advocate for the ex-Jehovah's Witness community. Monica, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
Yes, we are so absolutely happy that you reached out and wanted to share your story, and you have so much to share. And so we want you all to stick around and make sure that you listen all the way to the end, because she's got a lot of hidden gems that she's going to be sharing in this episode.
Now, Monica, I understand that you actually have a billboard that will be coming out soon. Could you share with our audience what this billboard that you have planned to put up is all about?
I was visiting the hometown where my family is that I cannot talk to because of mandated shunning. And it's a small town. It's where I grew up. I went all the way through school, graduated, and I thought, everyone here knows me. You drive into town and the sign says Hayward, Wisconsin, population 2,000 and something. I think it is actually more than that, and they haven't updated the sign, but word gets around in a small town. And I thought, if I put a billboard up here, that would really make some waves. Like, people would see it and it would matter. And my family would know that it was there and that other people were seeing it. And my story had recently been put on the Stop Mandated Shunning website. So I wanted to capitalize on that. And I thought, how can I make sure that people know about my story and can read it and read other stories about mandated shunning? So kind of in the middle of the night when I couldn't sleep and I'm thinking of all of this, I thought about this billboard and drove around and tried to find one that it was empty and had a phone number that I could call. And I had no idea what this would cost. I was kind of nervous to ask. And because it's a small town, I think probably it was a lot cheaper than it would be in a big city, like where I actually live currently. So it wasn't too bad. It was not cost prohibitive. And so I signed up for 16 weeks and my billboard will be going up in about a week. So hopefully a lot of people it'll raise awareness for mandated shunning and maybe even be a pathway to me seeing my family. If it reaches the hearts of some of my family members, it might, initially or over time. And I just like the idea that then they will also have to explain to their neighbors about the sign. People will read the story and they'll know who my family is. And, it's helpful, I think, for active witnesses to get out of their bubble and be forced to look at something through someone else's eyes. And they don't have to do that. I mean, I can't talk to them, but even if I did, they wouldn't listen to me. They just expect that I know the right way to look at it and that I know that what I'm doing is wrong because I'm not following direction and I'm an evil apostate. But if they have to explain the shunning policy of their organization to someone who doesn't know about it at all, who already has read my story, that's going to be a very difficult thing for them to do. And it might make them think about the policy in a different way.
Yes, that is a very powerful statement. We often make the point that each individual who decides to engage in some type of advocacy, they have their own ways, their own approaches, and all of these are simply allowing people to express what their concerns are. And that is in fact, that's the first time I've heard that's a very unique way of putting forth your advocacy. Yeah. Really
I'm hoping to start a trend. I think it would be great if more people did this. It might not be effective everywhere, but in smaller areas where people are well known, people talk a lot and know their neighbor, that is the sort of place where it would be really effective. Or maybe, at towns that host or cities that host conventions, there might be a time and a place where this might be a really effective way to raise awareness.
I agree. And I really feel like this is the way that this information can spread like wildfire. Yeah. And so I think that you are so creative in doing that. And I do hope that people will look into that more. That is perfect. In fact, we should probably try to see how much it's going to cost to get a Exjw Critical Thinkers sign in our area.
I would love that. That would be awesome.
I got to do it after I retire because I don't want to be going to work and people saying, I saw you on the billboard on I-95. Like, oh my God, that's crazy. And I got to go work with these people every day, right? But that is a good idea. So yeah, excellent.
Yeah, spread the word. I think a lot of people should do it. I think it would be really, really powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, excellent. So now you want to kind of talk about your family and your situation with how your family became Jehovah's Witnesses.
On my mom's side, I'm a third generation Jehovah's Witness. On my dad's side, fourth generation. And like a lot of people, they're maybe preached to at a vulnerable moment in their lives. And my great grandfather had lost two sons. The sons were 20 and 21 when they died, and he lost them in 1919 and 1920, one to the Spanish flu and the other to a burst appendix. And it was obviously devastating for my great-grandfather and great-grandmother. And when he spoke to his Lutheran minister or pastor, the pastor told him that his sons would most likely be in hell because they were not regular churchgoers. And of course, that was devastating to him. So at some point shortly thereafter, the probably would have been Bible students at that time, offered him this brochure. What is hell? Who are there? Can they get out? And that was just too much for him to resist, the idea that the confirmation that his sons were not only not in hell, but even more so that he would be able to see them again in the resurrection. So that was what made my great-grandfather become a very zealous Jehovah's Witness.
And you also had an interesting story to share about your grandfather with the blood issue.
I recently came into possession of this other piece of our Valine family heritage. And Anton Valine was my great-grandfather, the one who lost two sons in death and then joined the Witnesses. But you can see this is my grandfather, Gust Valine, and this is his original studies in the scriptures. The time is at hand with the sun disk, the winged sun disk. But I just wanted to talk about how ironic it was that my great-grandfather joined the religion after losing two sons in death and wanting to see them again. And the fact that he then joined the Witnesses almost caused the death of another son of his, my grandfather, Gust. My grandfather was working in construction, and there was a very serious accident. He had a very serious head injury, and they brought him to the hospital. And the only other family member there was a nephew who fortunately was not one of Jehovah's Witnesses. He knew the stance of the Witnesses and what would have ostensibly been my grandfather's stance, that he would have refused a blood transfusion. And he was not about to let his uncle die. He loved my grandfather very much. And so he followed the ambulance in the car and was the only family member at the hospital. And the neurosurgeon came out and said, can you go through his things and let me know if there's any medical directive, anything that I need to know before we proceed with the emergency surgery. And my great cousin, my grandpa's nephew, found the blood card, pretended that he didn't see it, and told the neurosurgeon to proceed. And there were no restrictions or anything. And he decided that if the family complained about it, he would just lie and say that he hadn't seen it. But actually, he didn't lie. He was so happy about what he had done that when my aunt complained, he lost his cool and said, don't ever complain about that again because I saved your father's life.
Oh, my goodness. That's a good one. That's really good.
Lord.
That is amazing. Isn't that something? Oh my God.
I didn't find out about that. No one in my family told me that my grandpa got a blood transfusion. I only found that out after I left, and I was desperate to connect with family. And it's very difficult because almost everyone is still a witness. And I knew this great uncle who's 80 years old now. And I contacted him and started talking to him. And he told me this story. And I was like, no one ever told me that my grandpa's life was saved. I mean, everyone knew the story of his accident. No one told me that he survived because he got a blood transfusion.
Wow. In this next segment, Monica will share the devastating effects of the Watchtowers shunning policy and how it affected her family.
So there are so many harmful side effects of shunning or effects of shunning. And one of the most horrific ones is suicide. A lot of those people aren't able to share their stories. They're not with us anymore. We've all heard of someone. If you're a witness, you've heard of someone who's committed suicide after being shunned. As a child, one of my aunts was disfellowshipped when I was only 6 years old. And I was told she was cut out of the family. Basically, I couldn't talk to her. I wasn't allowed to. And so the only times I saw her in my whole life were at my grandfather's funeral and at my grandmother's funeral. And I knew that it obviously must be traumatic for her, but we didn't really think a whole lot about it because she wasn't a part of our lives, right? We didn't see her, so we didn't have to think too much about it. When I was a teenager, I remember my mom telling me that my aunt was in the hospital and my grandma had gone to see her. And I remembered thinking right away, the first thought that came into my head was, I bet that's because the whole family shunned her. And then I remember thinking it was odd that my mom didn't seem more upset. And it was odd my mom didn't even go and visit her in the hospital. I don't know if anyone else did or if it was just my grandma. And I thought it was so strange that why was it okay for grandma to go and visit her when she was in the hospital, when it wasn't okay to talk to her before then. And I thought maybe, that would make my grandma visit her more. At least my grandma would talk to her, but I don't think it did. When I left, I didn't want to assume that my aunt's attempted suicide was because of the shunning without confirming that with her. I finally did reconnect with her. It was not easy. I didn't have any way to contact her. I had heard that she had a restaurant in a little town. And fortunately, that restaurant had her name in the title. And so via Google Maps, my brother and I were able to find her restaurant. And I had to write a letter to her restaurant. And I said, I've left. I don't believe this is right, the way the family has treated you. I'm not an active Jehovah's Witness anymore, and I'd like to get in touch with you. And she was absolutely wonderful. And we've had a wonderful relationship ever since, and we text each other almost every day. But she confirmed immediately that her suicide attempt was because of the shunning, that she just couldn't handle being cut off from the whole family. And then she told me that wasn't even the only time, that a few years later she attempted suicide a second time. So this is not something that is a trivial matter. Being shunned has the same effect. We now know, because of good research. Good research is so important. Now we know that it has the same effect as when we are being physically attacked. our body is going into a trauma situation when we are shunned by others, when we are excluded, when we're not feeling a part of the community. It's really serious and it needs to change.
So how did you find out about the religion and what woke you up?
So when I was starting to realize I didn't believe everything that I had been raised to believe, I was really looking for resources. It was hard because my husband still was a true believer. So I had to be very careful because that's a big no-no to look into any other sources of information other than what the organization provides. So I could kind of hide it by pulling up a YouTube video while I was driving to work or driving home. And I stumbled across a few videos that were so helpful for me in my process of just thinking about things in a new way and trying to figure out what I did believe and doing my own research. And I discovered the Critical Thinkers channel very early on in that process. And the one that really impacted me was the one where JT was talking about being a Bethelite and an elder who had left. And he mentioned 3 things that made him decide that this organization was not for him. And one of them was the stance on alternative service and the fact that it had changed. And that was huge for me because not a lot of people talk about that, but that was something that my dad talked about all the time because my uncle, his brother, had gone to jail for 2 years because of that. And so had many people in northern Wisconsin, in the area where I was from. Every congregation had a couple of people who had spent time in jail. We knew the prison where people went. You know, my aunt and my dad would go and visit my uncle in prison. And so the changing stance meant that my uncle and all these people went to jail for no reason because the Watchtower changed their stance on alternative service and said, oh, never mind. Actually, now you can accept alternative service if you are a conscientious objector. I actually have the brochure that my dad saved this because it was something that was so painful for him or so upsetting to him, the change. And he almost got drafted too. And he was a full-time minister because he was a pioneer. So he was able to avoid the draft that way. But my uncle was not. And so my uncle was the one who went to prison for 2 years.
So you want to talk a little bit about your activism, Monica?
Yeah, I'd love to do that. So I think there's so many ways that we could advocate so many issues that need attention being drawn to them. But I just thought the shunning was really the first thing, the main thing, because if you can take care of the shunning, if that can be eliminated, the other things will then organically get taken care of. Because if people are not afraid of getting expelled or kicked out or labeled an apostate just because they ask a question or just because they say, I don't like the fact that we don't report child abuse always, and I want us to make a policy change. If people are unhappy and they're able to express that freely without fear of getting shunned, I think the other things will be able to change little by little more organically. But before that can happen, something needs to change with the shunning policy. And it's the interesting thing, it's not just Jehovah's Witnesses, it's many groups that use that technique of organizational bullying. It can even happen in a workplace, but it often happens in high control religious groups, Jehovah's Witnesses, Amish, ultra-Orthodox Jews, fundamentalist, LDS. Baha'i, I recently learned, is another group that practices that. It's a very effective thing. Scientology is another big one that is known for their disconnection and shunning. And that is such a powerful deterrent. It terrifies people from questioning or changing their mind on things or bringing up concerns, and is just absolutely devastating to the people who suffer from the shunning.
And which group are you dealing with this with, the shunning?
It's stopmandatedshunning.org. The website invites you to take a 2-minute survey, very quick and easy, 10 or 11 questions. The survey is completely anonymous. So anyone who is still in a high control group and doesn't want to be discovered, they can still take the survey. And then also they're invited to tell their story. And that can be whatever level of privacy and anonymity a person wants. But they really need people for the sake of legal purposes and research. They do need some people who are really willing to put their name and face to their story, because it needs to obviously be legitimate, that these are real people with real stories to tell. So that is incredibly valuable. And I came upon that when I had just lost my parents. We'll get into that later, with a situation very shocking of abduction and blackmail. And I was determined rather, to find some help. And I was looking online and I stumbled upon this website shortly after it went up. And I was like, this is exactly what I need, what I know other people need to be aware of. And so I just kind of found my calling. I saw that and I'm like, I want to support this effort any way that I can. So the idea is it's not just one person shunning another person, because we all have the right to choose to cut someone out of our lives if they're toxic, that's not really working for us. We're not obligated to associate with someone, or we can do that as we choose. The difference is when it is mandated by a group. So you don't have a choice. You're obligated to shun. And if you don't follow the rules, you'll risk being shunned yourself.
Yeah. And something that's interesting about what you're saying is, it's mandated because with those new changes with the wearing the pants and the beard, how everybody just fell right in line with that. Yeah. And so if the religion itself would say, hey, look, no more shunning, people will fall right in line with that. So it just goes to show it is mandated and people want to talk to their family.
Yeah. And even the very, very slight change where you still have to shun them, except that you could call occasionally and invite them to the Kingdom Hall. Or when they show up at the Kingdom Hall, you could say hi and nothing more. And how many people, like Exjw Reddit was just blowing up with people saying, I've got a phone call from my mom that hasn't talked to me in 20 years, or my sister that hasn't talked to me in 15 years. So you're exactly right. This just shows that the witnesses, the members themselves, they don't want to do this. It's not coming from their heart. It's not their personal choice. And as soon as they have an opportunity or any loophole to reconnect with their family members, they're choosing to do it.
Yeah, this whole shunning thing is a very, very powerful tool that religious groups oftentimes use, as you mentioned. And there's quite a few. I mean, like you said, the numbers of groups that use this because it's so effective in controlling people. I think that what I find most interesting is that once the Watchtower told people that they could call just to show the influence, all of a sudden, like you mentioned, the floodgates just opened up. People called, but they knew they could only just talk for just a few minutes, and then they had to get off the phone. I mean, it's almost insulting, as it were, that grown people can be controlled in such a way. I can do it today, but tomorrow I can't. But I only can do this so much amount, and this is what we're seeing. And so, an organization that deals with mandated shunning for families and relatives and friends, it has a tremendous impact on people. It really does. Yeah. But that's a very interesting aspect that the organization that you're affiliated with now, that is what they are trying to focus on. And so we see so many groups and people and individuals literally attacking this issue from all sides. And that's what will make this work. And we've seen it. I mean, right now around the world, we see in country after country, the Watchtower is being called on the carpet. And we hope that it continues on because people, they need to be able to have their family. As the Watchtower itself has said, you should not have to choose between your religion and your family. You really shouldn't.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So share with us, how are things with your family now that you're active, that you're out, and that people know about this now that you've left?
It was 2019 when my husband and I stopped attending. We were both very discouraged. We had dealt with elders that had just wanted to throw their weight around. They really ran my husband through the ringer. He was only ever a servant, never an elder, because they would just nitpick and find things wrong with him. He was a good man who spoke up, and I think that was challenged. A lot of elders took that as a competition. We put in our Gilead application, and they wouldn't send it, and we didn't even find out they hadn't sent it. There were just so many things. There would be elders that didn't like us, who would tell other people to kind of keep their distance from us, that we were not good association, even when we were regular pioneering, just to cause difficulty in our life, because everyone knew us and we were well known and well liked. So that, among other things, I did know about 1975, and the way that they were kind of retelling that story rubbed me the wrong way. The changes with the new Bible, I knew my Bible backwards and forwards. I was a regular pioneer for so many years, had these scriptures memorized, and then they changed the Bible on me, and that just didn't feel right. And they changed the songs that were my kingdom melodies, that were like my national anthem. So little by little, a lot of things didn't add up, and I started doing research, which led me to the Critical Thinkers channel and other channels, and started to just plan a fade. But in 2019, my husband, he couldn't really take it anymore, even though he was still a believer, but he was discouraged and he stopped attending. And I thought, well, I'm not going to keep attending because I don't even believe this. So we both had to stop attending. And because we were going kind of a distance to support a foreign language group, and my family is kind of spread out, our friends are spread out, I was able to kind of hide it. And then COVID happened. So people didn't really realize until March of 2020, when I basically said something to my aunt that she triggered in her mind that I'm an apostate, because I brought up the changes that the organization had made on accepting organ transplants and some other things. So she spread the word to my family, and particularly to my mom, and told my mom that my mom should shun me. I wasn't disfellowshipped or anything, but she has a lot of influence over my mom. So, and my dad doesn't believe this and hasn't for 30 years, but just to keep the peace with his mom, with my mom, his wife, he started shunning me too for several months. Then he apologized and said things would be different, but he had to hide his relationship with me. So he would call me on the phone when my mom was at the meetings, for example, but that was all that the interaction we had. He was afraid to actually see me, visit me, or get together with me to upset the apple cart. And so we didn't have a lot of interaction. I didn't realize that my mom was having some memory issues until my little brother had open heart surgery. And when we all went to Arizona to the hospital for my brother's open heart surgery, and we became immediately aware that my mom was not doing well. She was repeating things a lot. I told my dad, "You need to get her checked for dementia," and he said, "Yeah, I will. I'll do that when we get back home to Wisconsin." And before that could happen, she was abducted by relatives. So because of her dementia, one of the things that happens, we now know, is anxiety, panic attacks, thinking people are out to get them. So you can imagine how that affects someone who's been raised as a witness, who's already been taught their whole lives to fear the end of the world, to fear the world and everything in it, to be afraid of people who no longer believe, your children, your husband, or your family members who don't believe they're evil and scary and poisonous and contagious. So she would normally be fine, and then she would have these panic attacks and call witness relatives crying. And instead of them recommending that she see a doctor, or instead of calling myself, who now I'm an apostate, so they don't talk to me, instead of talking to my dad, because they knew he didn't really believe it anymore either, they decided to abduct her and flew her back took her away on the pretense of a little bit of girl time and never gave her back to my dad and flew her to Wisconsin. And my parents, who had been married for 50 years, were separated for 4 months.
That's
Interject her.
Well, this is the first time that I've heard of anybody being kidnapped by their family because of a religion.
Yeah.
And that just goes to show you just how extreme they are. And to make someone feel like they can't talk to their daughter, even though they're not disfellowshipped, is very sad. And it's very telling.
Yeah.
This is powerful here. That this is the type of stories that people down the job don't know anything that would actually take place. And even though the Watchtower would say, we didn't tell them to do that, it's the overall influence of the organization that has moved people. Well, we got to get her out of there because she's in a den with Satan's agents, that kind of crazy stuff. And witnesses end up taking these type of actions, thinking that they're doing something that's righteous and is good, even though they were never directly told that. The culture of Jehovah's Witnesses produces this type of mindset. We're going to steal her from her husband, her daughter, that kind of crazy stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. The end justifies the means because they're God's one true people. We're in, theocratic warfare.
Yeah. That gets you on the Circuit Assembly and the Regional Convention to tell this story. We rescued her.
Yeah, right.
That's true.
My goodness.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, and when we interview different people on our platform, it's just telling. It helps other people to see that they're not alone. And I just got through reading a comment that somebody had left on our channel, a video that we did a couple of days ago. And they're like, will you please stop doing these interviews because everybody left the same way and we've got to stop, putting this stuff out here. But just like you're talking about the advocacy group that you belong to is looking for more stories. And if we stop putting these videos out, the algorithm will not, pick up our channel because you won't be putting out videos. And so this is why people don't understand why it's important to continue doing interviews like this, to continue putting this out into the hemisphere, as it were, so that people can continue to see that they're not alone.
Right.
And it doesn't make a difference how many people tell the story. Everybody has a different twist to what they're saying.
Exactly. Yeah. And so there's always someone who's going to really relate to certain stories. Certain stories will resonate with them and their own experience. And there's happily new people waking up all the time. And then it's new to them because they had never seen this type of content before. And we want to keep having this content out there because it's such a huge help. It's difficult to get therapy. It's expensive. A lot of times you don't know where or how to go about that. I sure didn't. And so YouTube videos like this channel were my therapy that I couldn't get any other way.
Absolutely. And not only that, when it comes to therapy, I've talked to people and they said it took them 20 years to find the right therapist because everyone may not know your situation. And so if you get the wrong person, you're not going to be able to connect with them the way you need to. And I would just tell people to keep, if you do have the funds and the insurance, I'm not saying not to get a therapist. You just got to find the right one.
Right.
And when you do find that therapist, I would highly recommend that you tell them about your Jehovah's Witness experience because some people don't mention that component.
Right.
And at that point, the therapist doesn't know exactly what they're working with. So if you're not really transparent with them to let them know what you're dealing with, then that might be the reason why you weren't getting that connection to begin with.
Right. And that's actually the research project is going to address that issue. And some of the people at the Exjw conference were therapists who recognize that actually therapists don't get training on high control groups and how they affect people. And it's such a unique set of circumstances. And people get the wrong recommendations from therapists who don't understand high control groups. They get misdiagnosed, very misunderstood, and it can actually cause more harm than good if a therapist doesn't understand the the component of religious abuse or spiritual abuse and high control. And so the research project is also not just going to be interviewing survivors or former members. I have the list here. They're gonna be interviewing and incorporating in their research academics, human rights activists, legal experts, and psychological therapists, in addition to former members, so that that can be part of their solution, is to show how we can help and change moving forward and get more help for people that's more appropriate to their specific needs.
Yeah. And I've been doing some research on therapists too, and a lot of therapists are starting to do group therapy. I may be wrong, but they're doing a lot more group therapy, and the reason why they're doing that group therapy is because they're trying to help people be in a group setting to see that different things that they're dealing with, they're not alone. And so when you take the approach to how we're online doing these interviews and people can come out and see the different people that's sharing their stories, they definitely can see, hey, look, I am not alone, And mm-hmm. So I think this is very difficult for the Watchtower. I think that because there's so many people that's growing in numbers, I think they're kind of afraid that pretty soon there's going to be more people in the X community that are actually active witnesses.
Yeah. Watchtowers should be very afraid.
Yeah. The numbers are staggering. So, Monica, what about your parents? I mean, your mom was abducted. What happened?
So they were separated for 4 months. And during that time, they didn't always have communication. Sometimes my brother had blocked my dad on my mom's phone. Sometimes they were texting, which was something they had never, ever done before they had been separated. That's not how they communicated. And my dad could tell that sometimes this was not just his wife's words coming through in the messages, but over time, the things that he was being messaged were that he needed to stay away from myself and my little brother, the one who had surgery, because we no longer believe. And he needed to get help, go to the elders and get help. So reconvert. And he needed to move from where they were living to the small town where my brother, who is still a believer, could be there to supervise basically and make sure that my dad stayed in line. And so during these 4 months, my dad went to Adult Protective Services. He went to multiple attorneys. I supported him in that. He said, we need outside intervention, but it was something that those people didn't really understand how to address or deal with. And so finally, it was too much for him, and he just gave in to all their demands. He cut off myself, my little brother, kicked my little brother out of their home. So my brother was homeless, lost his health insurance because he had moved in with my parents after his surgery. So he ended up being in a really difficult circumstance for a while. And yeah, so I haven't been able to hear from my dad for almost a year now since that happened. Really tragic, because my dad has been Pimo, just trying to hang in there and hoping that people would wake up without him having to expose the fact that he didn't believe anymore. And it was devastating for his mental health. And he just didn't have the strength to make a different choice. I think he would have had the ability to address it if he had been thinking clearly, but his mental health had suffered so much from just being in that state of cognitive dissonance and that kind of paralyzation for so many years that he just didn't know how else to deal with the situation, and he just gave in.
Oh, yeah. People, they just reach a point where they just simply get tired. I don't want to fight anymore. And they just simply go along. As they say, they go along to get along. And we've seen that with so many families and people who are Pimo. They just reach a point where I'm just tired. And it's unfortunate. It's very unfortunate.
Yeah. It was really hard for me as a daughter to see that happen to my dad, because he is one of the smartest people I know. and always talked a good game about his values. In fact, that was one of the things that bothered him, like the alternative service, the changing, and how harmful that was for people. He was always advocating for the little guy, and saying you need to listen to the people that are suffering. We need to stop and pay attention to them, and we need to include everyone, and don't talk behind someone's back. The golden rule: treat others like you want to be treated. He was someone who had started out with all of those values, and yet because he forced himself to just kind of suffocate what was his authentic personality and his real values, just out of fear of the consequences of speaking up. Eventually, I think that he just lost who he really was. He totally lost touch with who he was. So it really is, it's a hard situation to be in.
You know what? And just listening to what you're saying, it was like, it was all the forces that was against him. Because when you have an institution and you're one person trying to be this, the golden rule person, do unto others as you want others to do unto you, and the religion is not allowing that to happen because of their shunning practices and things like that, that's enough to make somebody really just check out. Mm-hmm. And there's so many people at the Kingdom Hall that probably have checked out too, but because they really believe that this is the truth, then they have no other alternative. They feel like they have no other alternative,
I feel like I've had this conversation with a couple of people who have parents who are who really, they've seen that progression. I think people who are in, or, kind of questioning, or even really don't believe it anymore, but stay in that environment, they tell themselves that they can, just kind of stay in this and it won't really affect them. I don't think that's possible. I've seen it happen so many times where people just really, really lose their selves and their personality. And just a lot of older people just become a watered down version of themselves. It might have been that elder that, they would speak up if something was wrong, or they didn't have to, go along with the body or whatever, or that sister who didn't color in between the lines. And they get older. And if they never make a break, if they never say, wait a minute, this is wrong, I'm not doing this anymore, they almost sink into that and just give themselves up to the rules. And just because it's like you said, it's too exhausting to fight it internally.
I'm tired is what they'll say.
Yeah. The fight is not in people.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because that religion is a fight. It's a fight every day. And after a while, people get tired of fighting against the grain.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, he's trying to beat the empire. The empire strikes back.
It is. It's very difficult.
And that's what kind of makes it nice to have sites like this and others, so people can see that there is an alternative. And I think that's very important. Our site and so many other content creators, we show people that there is an alternative. There is an alternative.
Yeah. You guys are a wonderful example because you're just this amazing power couple, happy, positive vibes, just doing wonderful work. And you have a very appealing way about you that is so soothing. It was to me when I was waking up. And I recommend your channel all the time, especially for people that are just starting to question or starting to wake up, because you just have a wonderful, joyful way about you and presenting things. And we can tell you haven't lost your joy and your love of life, and you're the perfect example of your life does not have to be a train wreck because you leave a high control group.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate the recommendations and the kind words. And I mean, we are activists and things, and we have the roller coaster ride, just like anybody else. Just because you leave the religion, we still are human too. But we try to be out here to help people. But there's things, everybody's dealing with something.
Yeah, we somebody helped us. We try to help somebody else. But you still deal with the cares of everyday living. And
what we try to do is, when you leave the religion, one of the things that I notice is like I'll give you my own little spiel here. When I'm working at my job, because you work a full-time job, but you have issues at the workplace. And so one of my biggest pet peeves is, oh my goodness, if I wasn't one of Jehovah's Witnesses, I wouldn't be working for these people here. I would be their boss instead of them being my boss. And I think those are our issues is, sometimes it's the challenges of the work that you have to do. And that can get to you after a while. And the reason why you're in that situation because of being a Jehovah's Witness. Yeah. And I think that's probably one of our biggest challenges that we face since we left the Watchtower.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I think a lot of people can relate to that. We missed out on so many opportunities, and we try to make up for lost time. We try to make different choices, but there's just no way you can go back and redo those early years when you would have gotten an education or you would have made different choices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Financially and every other way as well. Yeah.
I'm telling you, because the way I look at it is who got there first. So in my situation, me being older than this one lady that hired me in the job, I didn't have my degree at the time, but she had a master's degree. And so she didn't feel, like intimidated to hire me because she got a master's and I'm just with a high school diploma with some college, right? So I get hired in, but what she didn't realize is that I was good at what I did. And she began to notice that. And she began to try to make me like invisible in the office. And it was rough. It was rough for a long time. And finally she left our office. And so now I'm like the only one in that office working in that capacity. But when I tell you it was a long time getting through that, and the only reason why I think I survived it is because I was a Jehovah's Witness, and going to the Kingdom Hall and dealing with all the crazy people at the hall gave me the fortitude to deal with that on the job. I'm telling you, it was I
think that there is something to that. I've thought that as well, because we learn to totally stand out and be different since we're little kids. We can't say the Pledge of Allegiance. We can't celebrate birthdays. Don't eat that cupcake. We have to stick out like a sore thumb, whether we want to or not. But we do, I think that it isn't a bad thing in a lot of ways, because we do learn to be able to be independent, to be miserable and just be like, oh, that's just the way it is.
Yeah. And so I just try to tell people, like, we're human too. And, we have our issues and we do what we can, and we try to, and I wake up with a smile every day because, I feel like my activism is what keeps me going, to the point where I could be having a bad day at work, but because I know I got all these people that I'm trying to communicate with and I'm trying to help them get through it, I'm just excited to be able to do this work.
Yeah.
And that's what gives me my joy.
I love to hear that, because that's, when we went to this Exjw conference, both my husband and I, and he had gone to the Be Free protest last year. I wanted to go and I couldn't. So I'm like, can you go for me and support this? It's awesome. And he was really excited and he had a fabulous time and met wonderful people. And I feel like, when we were pioneering together, we had that and we thought we were helping people. Little did we know. But that was, we felt that purpose and that we were, doing this together and helping people. And I felt like we had kind of lost that, didn't really find our footing until we got into this stop mandated shunning. And we're both really excited about it. We see how beneficial it is. And we kind of got that back. If we wouldn't have ever been witnesses, we would have found our purpose another way, but everyone needs a purpose and something that brings that joy. And a lot of us were happy being witnesses because we thought we were helping people. And it's so heartbreaking when we realize we were actually hurting them by spreading this message. But now if we can find a different way to help people, we're good at it. We did train to do that sort of thing.
Well, look at it like this, too. I feel like if I wasn't one of Jehovah's Witnesses, I probably wouldn't be the person I am today. And so, be careful looking back and saying, oh, I wish I wouldn't have been in this situation. Now, for people who are being abused, that's a whole different ball of wax. But, I just feel like my life experience made me the strong person I am today. And I just feel like, I'm glad I had the experience and I'm glad I woke up when I did. So I try to tell people, when you wake up to the situation of knowing that this is not the truth, don't look back so much. Look and see where you are and start moving forward, because you have more experience in life than you realize. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times people don't realize that they need to take the experience that they had as a Jehovah's Witness and put that over in another area to get them another job or whatever they need to do if they're still able to work. Because I took all of my skills that I had and channeled it into a whole nother career, So I just think that people, they just lose it, but they don't really realize what kind of skill sets they have unless they start doing that inventory of what they know how to do. I just want to put that in there because it needs to be said.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah, there were good things that we learned and good things that we became, and that we have because of our life experience. So we don't want to discount that either.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it definitely shapes who we are today. That's for sure. Good, bad, and different. It definitely shapes us. There's no question about that.
And we need to accept who we are, right? We can't change it. I think sometimes when people feel this need to make this huge break, like I'm never going to talk about JW stuff again. I think that maybe isn't always a working strategy, because it's always going to be a part of what formed us and our way of thinking. And if we, instead of just being devastated by that, if we can take that and be like, there were some positive things too. There were things that I learned, things that benefited me, a way to see the world that is very unique. Now we can see things that other people don't see, pick up on things that, other people don't pick up on because of our experience. And if we can just embrace all of that and accept that that's all part of who we are, I think it's a good place to be mentally.
Absolutely.
It helps all of us become better at detecting when somebody is trying to sell us a bill of goods. We can use that. That's important.
Yes. Uh-huh. Right. Well, like your channel, Critical Thinkers, you learn those critical thinking skills after you've been scammed to that level.
A used car salesman has no chance, right?
Oh, that's cute. Well, Monica, we want to thank you so much for being on the program, and your story was very, very interesting. And we hope that a lot of people will be able to take to heart everything that you've stated about your activism, your family, and how you've been able to pick up the pieces in your life and move on and help other people.
Yes. And I'm sure, unbeknown to your family, when they see that billboard, it will be something it'll be a sight to see. It's going to be a sight to see.
I'd love to be a fly on the wall, as they say.
Absolutely.
Yes. So thank you so much for being on the program.
Thank you for all that you're doing. You have helped so many people.
Hey, someone helped us. We helped somebody else.
Right. Absolutely. So this has been Lady C.
And this has been JT.
And we'll see you all on the next episode.
This program was sponsored by Critical Thinkers.